What if the only thing standing between you and your next chapter is your own permission to begin? Welcome to the Midlife Reinvention Podcast, a podcast helping women in career and life transitions achieve clarity on their next steps so they can transform uncertainty into an energizing next chapter. I'm your host, Kavita Ahuja, and the founder of It's My Time Now Coaching. If you're wondering what's next in your career or life, you are in the right place. Through solo and guest episodes, you'll gain practical tips, tools, and inspiration to help you uncover blocks, gain confidence, and be, do, and have what you want. I rediscovered myself after the age of 50, and I know you can too. It's my time now to help you do just that. I'm so excited you're here. Let's dive in. In this powerful episode with Jillian Reilly, you'll discover why reinvention isn't a one-time event, but a muscle you can strengthen and flex over a lifetime. How to move forward when fear, judgment, and self-doubt threaten to keep you stuck in yesterday's story. And practical mindset shifts like thinking small and feeling your way forward that make big changes feel less overwhelming and more possible. If you've been waiting for the right time to start your next chapter, this conversation might just give you the permission you've been waiting for. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Midlife Reinvention Podcast, a career and life transitions podcast. If you're asking yourself what's next, you are in the right place. I interview incredible women across the globe for this podcast who really share their stories of reinvention and who will give you their insights and expertise on how to rediscover who you really are, what you really want, and how to get there in this next stage of life. This week, I'm thrilled to have on the show Jillian Reilly. Jillian is a founder, writer, keynote speaker, and consultant. Having spent her 30-year career working in social, organizational, and individual change across Africa, Asia, and Central Europe, Jillian's focus is on helping people unlock their ability to navigate change and accelerate growth and learning. Her upcoming book, The 10 Permissions, guides readers in permitting themselves to design their lives that fully leverage the possibilities of our disruptive world. I'm so thrilled to have you on the show today, Jillian. How are you?
It's great to be here, Kavita. I'm just, I love the subject that you explore in your conversations. I think it's never been more relevant. So I'm super excited to be with you and explore the 10 permissions with you.
Fantastic. And you're coming in from South Africa.
I am. Yeah. So it's part of my story. I'm obviously, well, maybe you can tell, American by birth.
Yes.
Came to South Africa many years ago after graduating from Northwestern University, kind of wanting to be a part of something meaningful. I was supposed to have a very conventional career path, get good grades, get a good job sort of story. And I surprised and confused everybody by saying I want to go to South Africa. So and what was meant to be sort of a 6-month stint to be here for the 1994 elections that saw Nelson Mandela come into power kind of set my life on a trajectory that eventually brought me back here. So I've spent my career, as you mentioned in your introduction, working on social change, organizational change, and it really all started with that decision out of university to come here. So it's been a wonderful education.
I actually was going to ask you this because when we had met prior to this, that stood out for me, that you're kind of an unconventional background that you've had, and that you've followed the young age. You followed your desire. You left the comfort and predictability of America, and you sought out to head to South Africa. And so just tell me, if you would, Jillian, how did this kind of experience, especially working on, I know that you worked with people with HIV and AIDS in Zimbabwe. So how did these kind of experiences that you just shared, how did they kind of lead you and shape who you are today and what you're doing today?
Yeah. No, I mean, my work today is very much a result of both my personal path, that, as you say, sort of at a very early age, listening to my own desires and acting on them in the face of a lot of resistance on the part of my family and people around me who didn't necessarily understand.
Mm.
So that willingness on my part to kind of, to use my own language, find my own unique way rather than following the way that has sort of been laid out in front of me. That experience on a personal level has very much informed my work. And then obviously that choice took me into a line of work that was all about, I would say, reinvention. It was people in various circumstances. You referenced HIV/AIDS, so I'll speak about that. People who
Yes.
were faced with a tremendous social threat and massive social change occurring all around them. And I was very young. I went to run an HIV/AIDS program when I was 27. I had a very big budget. I thought I could do anything. I thought I would stroll into this very complex challenge, this very complex moment, and with enough resource and enough logic and enough sort of tools and resources on my side, I would help these people manage this crisis. And I would say my sense of failure in that moment really kind of put me off on an interesting path of reflecting around how do we help people adapt and change because they want to or because they need to. In that instance, the HIV/AIDS epidemic was requiring people to really rethink so many elements of how they lived,
Mm-hmm.
whether it was the nature of their marriages, the way they raised their children, really fundamental elements of their culture and lives that they were being asked to change. And in some ways, you would think that when faced with this tremendous threat, people would readily do that.
Yes.
But of course, they don't. In the face of a tremendous threat, what we often do is to kind of retreat back to the known and familiar. We kind of hang on to convention and tradition because it keeps us safe.
Yes.
We
Yeah.
double down on what we've always done because we hope that by doing that, we might protect ourselves from the changes that are kind of really rocking our worlds. And I don't need to talk about Zimbabwe for any of us to relate to that. I
Mm-hmm.
think in many ways, globally, we're going through that right now. But it was really humbling for me to be
Mm-hmm.
present in that moment as somebody who thought that if I gave people things, they would change. And that
Mm-hmm.
was really what led me to this theme of permission, which is I could give them everything at my disposal, but I couldn't give them permission.
Mm-hmm.
They had to give that to themselves. That kind of
Mm-hmm.
intimate negotiation with yourself
Yes.
to show up differently to your
Yes.
life, to say,
Yeah.
I'm going to be the first one. I'm going to be the last one. I'm going to be the one to challenge the way we've always done things, to
Yeah.
defy expectation. I mean, these are really tough things that come down to individual choice.
Yes.
And so that kind of was the seed of the theme around personal agency, sort of
Mm-hmm.
self-authorization. It really started there
Mm-hmm.
and made me very much for the all the years that follow kind of really explore this idea of what does it take for us to allow ourselves to adapt and change. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, in this moment, I think that's what we're being called to do in a variety of ways. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's so I see that every day, and I find it fascinating how you took your experience at a young age, like this kind of global life-changing epidemic or whatever, then and then you realize that this is actually happening at a personal level, like it happens globally, but it happens individually as well. And the fact that you said, okay, well, how do I take this experience and help people adapt and change? And you're so right. I think, I mean, I know that people, for example, who come to me, they want to change. They know that they feel stuck, and I can give them all the tools and all the knowledge to help them. But unless and until they say, yes, I'm going to do this for myself, or as you said, give myself
Mm.
permission to do it. I can give them all the tools that they need, but it's about the permissions. So I think this may be related to what we were just talking about, but you had said, I'll quote what you had said, is that permission is the inherent difference between people who adapt and change as the world does and those who remain stuck in yesterday's stories. It's the difference between overwhelm and burnout and personal growth and satisfaction. So that's kind of similar to what we were talking about. So I think we also talked a little bit about reinvention is really a necessity rather than a privilege. Maybe you could shed some light on that.
Yeah. I mean, I sort of see reinvention and as a muscle that more and more we're all going to need to strengthen and flex, because traditionally, historically, it was the midlife reinvention, the point at which you got to a stage where you were so dissatisfied that you couldn't tolerate it anymore, and then you took some drastic action to try to rectify that. And I think where we are and where we need to be is a place where we understand reinvention as a process of ongoing adaptation to changing circumstances, rather than a periodic fix of a life that feels like it no longer has relevance or satisfaction or currency for you. And what you quoted was, if your identity is completely wrapped up in the way it's always been, and you find safety and security and status in that, it is extremely hard for you to imagine that you will have those things in a different setup. And I would apply that. I went from working in Zimbabwe to working in boardrooms in New York City. Same dynamic. People whose sense of identity was very much wrapped up not in a culture of a social culture, but in a corporate culture. So again, am I allowed to have a different conversation with my boss? Am I allowed to share my ideas readily and challenge power? The constant calibration that we all undertake, mostly kind of implicitly and unconsciously, about deciding who we're allowed to be, depending upon the room we enter into, the situation that we're in. And I think as we find our world feeling and becoming ever more fluid, the need to have that explicit conversation with yourself of saying, okay, am I going to do this? Am I going to make a choice to break from what I've always done or who I've always been in order to do what I want to do, what I need to do? And kind of elevating that to an explicit conversation. In the book, I describe it as a conversation with your own fears and your own story, and sort of testing out how much that story as fixed and ironclad as you think it is. Because
Yeah.
a lot of times we're the ones who say, "Oof, but if I do that, it's dangerous, or I'll be rejected or demoted or fired or whatever," when actually the circumstances and the consequences aren't nearly as dire. So it's this negotiation with yourself to start to step into new ways of showing up to your life. And in calling it a muscle, it's that, like anything, the more you do it, the more you feel able to do it. The first time it's really hard. And then subsequently, you
Yeah.
start to realize that maybe you're more secure than you think you are.
Yes. Yeah. I love that. I love that analogy that reinvention is a muscle to strengthen and flex, because I really think
Mm,
that's so true. Because oftentimes when we think, like, let's say we're in a transition point in our lives, and we feel okay, like something needs to change. Maybe I'm internally unhappy, or maybe something has happened externally, like maybe you've been laid off, or you've gone through a divorce, or major transitions. And often people think that they can fix things by just changing situations. Like I'll
right,
just get a new job, or I'll just move cities or whatever, and everything will be
right.
fixed. But that is what I kind of talk about, the difference between that's a change in circumstances.
Mm,
It's not a
mm,
transition. A transition and a reinvention is really understanding what is causing this inherent unsettling feeling, or what is
mm,
causing that, and what is at the heart of it. And until and unless you decide or understand that, then the change won't take whatever
right.
little things you do. It'll just come back to the same unhappiness or unsettling
Mm,
feeling. So that kind of came into my mind when you were talking about that.
mm, mm.
It's really understanding your sense of identity and
Yeah.
who you really want to be outside of who you're supposed to be, I guess. Right?
And
Yeah.
that's precisely what the book is about. And I think it's really important for me with the book and with these ideas that we're discussing, that you don't see them as a fix, as you've just described. Because
Hmm.
in my experience, when you're trying to fix a problem, you've already reached a point where your own sense of capability to show up differently to your life has often been sort of weakened or depleted. And then you're just grasping for
Mm-hmm.
external ways of sort of provoking a new
Mm-hmm.
way of being. In the book and in the workbook that you get with it, I say, I actually don't want you to blow up your life or change anything about it.
Yeah.
Start working with what you have and where you are,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because oftentimes that's what sort of prompts that internal sort of conversation, reflection, the self-awareness
Yes,
that for me is the game changer. That's how
absolutely.
you build a muscle. That's how you
Yeah.
begin to show up differently, not just by moving things around in your life
Right.
and hoping that they make you feel different.
Yeah, it's kind of like
Mhm.
shuffling the furniture versus actually
Yeah,
seeing how do you want the room to be designed, right? So,
exactly.
so Jillian, people who are listening to this podcast, as as just kind of described, are really many of them are in transition in their careers or their
Mm,
life, and I think what's holding a lot of people back from making these changes that they really want is lack of courage, like they're just
mm,
afraid. And
yeah.
also, they're looking at what are other people going to think, or what is their judgment from others. We touched on that a little bit, but what would you advise these people? And I mean, and that definitely happened to me. And I was considering leaving my long-term career, but it took me 3 years to
Hmm.
really finally decide to do it because I was afraid of, was I going to be good enough to do this
Right.
next thing, or what are people going to say? What if I fail? All these what ifs, and I'm not good enough,
Hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
so tell us, what would you say? How did you do it, perhaps? And what would you advise
Mm.
people who are feeling this way and in their fears and fear of judgment and lack of confidence?
I think, first of all, to be kind to yourself and to normalize those feelings, to recognize that those, to observe them and to acknowledge the fact that they're present as they would be in any single human who's trying to do something that they've never done before. So rather than seeing them as a warning sign, see them as just a sign, like flip them around to, okay, I'm moving into unfamiliar territory. They are an indication of you boundary crossing. They are not a sign to turn back. So once you sort of look at them and say, okay, I see you. And I understand your role. Your role is
Mm-hmm.
to protect me, right? I mean, that's why they're there, because you're trying to protect yourself. And I recently published something on Substack called The Four Fears, which is kind of getting granular and getting more familiar with these fears that you're carrying with you. And
Mm-hmm.
I describe them as novelty. Anything new is going to feel scary. Well, acceptability, as you said, when I move towards that new thing, will I be accepted there? Will other people accept that choice?
Mm-hmm.
Desirability, will I like it? What if I go and get something new and then I don't like it, and then I haven't improved my situation at all? And then capability. Will
Mm-hmm.
I be able in this new set of circumstances to cope, to be respected? And I think once you sort of begin to treat fear, once you kind of defang it a little bit
I
and
love that.
just
Yeah.
understand that it exists as a protector to you, but not as a preventer.
Yeah.
So you are able to move with it. And I think one of the things I talk about in the book is beginning to understand the things that are required versus the things that are desired. Like, it's really nice for all of us to have the approval of the people around us. It's really nice for us to have some sort of guarantees. Those aren't required for action, they're just
Mm.
desirable, right? So if, for instance, your mother or brother disagreed with your choice, would that be the worst thing that could happen to you? Or would you simply have a moment of discomfort with them of saying, okay, I'm going to actually, I recognize your feelings and I respect them, but I'm going to move forward anyway. I hope you respect that I'm operating based on my own knowledge of myself, because guess what? I know
Mm.
myself better than anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think owning our own authority is really important for women. We have been taught our entire lives that our acceptability is paramount and that rejection is akin to death. And in fact, it's okay. We can disappoint people, people can disagree with us. and we're still in one piece and we're still moving forward. So I think all of those things, kind of getting more comfortable with being afraid and realizing that it's not a reason not to act, and beginning to cultivate your own inner voice and your own belief in your own authority. I do know myself and I do trust myself. There is nobody in the world who knows you better than you.
Yes.
And I always say that unless somebody else brings facts, new facts to my choices. So, to use your example, if I know somebody who works at that company that I'm thinking of moving to and they know that it's a terrible workplace, well, then I need to take those facts into consideration, don't I? But if their mere opinion is one that I don't think that sounds like a good move for you, it's an opinion. And there are a million of them in the world. And the last thing I'll say is that my own experience of moving into new places is that the people closest to you will often be the ones trying to keep you exactly where you are.
Yes.
Because they want to protect you, they love you, they love the version of you that they know. They have their own fears, they have their own issues. They're acting in very good faith, but they're not always acting in a way that will facilitate and accelerate your growth.
Your growth. Yeah.
So
True.
again, it's very loving, but it's not always productive when, as a fully fledged adult, you know you need to do things differently. So
Yes.
I think it's really important. That's where, when I talk about self-authorization, personal agency, we need to stand in those things, not as some sort of act of rebellion, but as a firm sort of claiming of our own power.
I completely resonate with everything you just said, because when I was thinking of changing it, doing this, starting a whole new career at 52, those people close to me, obviously they loved me, but there was like this, why are you doing this? Like, why do you want to, everything seems great. You're very comfortable. And that was the whole key, is that I was comfortable. I wasn't growing. And I had a bit of resentment in the beginning, but then I realized afterwards that they were just trying to keep me safe. And I love that when you said defang the fear, because I often talk about the fear as a gremlin. Like, if you actually put a name to it, draw it, like it could be a goblin or a gremlin or whatever. And when you recognize its presence and you actually understand why it's there and that it's there to protect you, that's so important. So I love when you said that see fear as an indicator of you boundary crossing, not a sign to turn back, which is really, really great.
For a lot of
Yeah.
people, anything that looks unfamiliar will, on the surface and on by its very presence, be create pause. And so again, beginning to understand your own relationship with novelty. For some people, it's much easier. And part of what I talk about in the book is, I think, in a very fluid world, it's really important for us to kind of begin to get more and more familiar with the new and the different. Because
Yeah.
if something that's new stops you in your tracks and you immediately recoil and say, okay, I don't know this, therefore I see it as a threat, you will likely be very slow to adapt and respond to things, which is fine and understandable. Again, it's not a failure, but it is a way of operating. So I think a lot of this is just getting really much more familiar with how you operate, and particularly in reinvention, sort of how do you operate in new and fluid circumstances where you don't know? You're crossing the boundary into the new. And what does that feel like for you? A lot of it is just managing yourself.
Yeah.
And that's really what the 10 permissions is about, that self management process to kind of show up differently. Oftentimes, you are your biggest limiter. Nobody else has to do it for you because you're the one caught up in your own what if stories.
Most of the time, I would say.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
really. So that's kind of going back to your early questions about my own experiences, was realizing that as much as we can put a lot of emphasis on external forces, in my case, I was caught up in myself as an external force, and actually realizing that we're all negotiating with ourselves all the time. And I have some influence over that as a person in your life, but at the end of the day, you're the one who's got to decide what you're going to do.
Absolutely. Yes. You mentioned the permissions. You're in your book, you have 10 permissions. So these are mindset shifts we needed to people to help people navigate these transitions or these reinventions.
Hmm.
And so,
Hmm.
can you share maybe a few of them that I know probably don't have time to go through all 10, but maybe some that, a few that you think would be beneficial for the listeners.
Mm.
And
Well, I think let me focus on two that I think are particularly important for reinvention as part of this conversation. And the first one is think small. So I think we often feel like we've got to have this big picture work done in our heads
yeah.
and that we need to somehow kind of leapfrog from here to there. And we want it to be seamless and we want it to be glorious. And we want, when in fact, as you described, it can often be a multi-year, multi-step process. And that's okay. It's all
Hmm.
right. It's fine for you to move slowly through things step by step, particularly if you're not sure of what the other side looks like or the new thing looks like. That's really a call for people to not use lack of clarity in sort of a long runway forward about how you're going to get from here to there as a reason not to act, because that's
Hmm.
what I see so much of. I know the first two steps look kind of clear to me, but then I don't know. And it's like, it's the path will appear once you start walking on it
Hmm.
vibe of allow yourself to discover and explore as you go and to not think that that's a flaw or a failing.
Hmm.
That's what happens when you're moving into something new. It's very hard for people to have a crystal clear outcome and then move towards it seamlessly. So, and people get a little way into it and then it starts to feel uncomfortable or unclear and they
Yeah.
go back and say, oh, that was a mistake. Nope, that's just how it is. That's how
Yeah.
it feels. That's what it's like.
Yeah, I often say that's so, I totally believe that because if you're looking at the entire mountain in front of you, it's just overwhelming and it can be like,
Mm,
I can't do that. But if you just take a first step and maybe just put on your running shoes and then take and say, yeah, I could do this. And the other thing I often say as well, like, how does this feel? Like you have two choices in front of you, or maybe a few. How does it
mm,
feel to do one versus the other? And always listen to your inner being or your inner
mm,
self,
mm,
which tells you that
mm.
this one probably feels good. And then if you follow that, then it will kind of enlighten the path in front of you
That's
versus
right.
having to be stuck to this like big thing that can
That's right.
overwhelm us. And the multi-step process is,
You're leading me to one other one, which is feel your way, which is very much
oh,
what you're saying.
okay, okay.
Listen
Fe-
in
yeah.
again, trust yourself. So as you're moving along, you will perhaps have a variety of voices around you saying, how's it going? Where are you? Take myself as an example. As I was working on my book, it was just like it took a long time. And there were plenty of people around me who are kind of like, well, what's happening? What's going on? It took a lot of listening in to keep going and not kind of go, oh, it's now feeling like it's too long. I haven't gotten there, wherever there is.
Hmm.
So that willingness to trust your instincts and to listen to your own voice to me is a game changer
Hmm.
because again, it's the difference between people who turn back too soon, who never pursue the big thing because it just feels too fuzzy and unclear. And that links to the other one and the last one that I'll share, which a lot of people sort of raise eyebrows about, which is forget about the future. And of course, we're all products of a world that has said you have your big vision and then you deduce your way forward from that. You work backwards. So I want to start a new company. I want to become a chef. And I get this crystal clear idea of what I want. And then I start to work backwards to figure out how to get there. And I think a lot of times it's unrealistic that you're going to have that crystal clear view. And that again, it's not a requirement for action.
Hmm.
That in a very fluid and disruptive world, if you think that you know where you're going based on where you are now, you might miss out on opportunities that present themselves along the way. So remain open. And I kind of call it a sort of direction mindset rather than a destination mindset. So I generally know what I think I want to do. I'd like to kind of transition and use my culinary skills more. I think I want to be a chef. I don't know if that's going to be in a restaurant or online, blah, blah, blah. But I have a sense that that's where I'm going to go.
Hmm.
And I'm going to remain very alive as I move towards that, to what I'm learning, to what's revealing itself. And it's possible that what I thought there doesn't turn out to be what I'm discovering as I go. And
And it's
all of
not a
that,
failure. That's not a failure.
it's not a
Yes.
failure.
Yeah.
How can you? You have
Yes.
to be allowed and be willing to
Yeah.
go and discover. And if it turns out that it was not what you expected, and you feel the need to return back to where you were, well, that's okay. I mean, you could
Mm.
never have known that unless you tried, and you've certainly learned something from that experience. Or if it turns out to be bigger, better, even more exciting than you were thinking, fantastic. Allow yourself to kind of really go for it. But I think a lot of people never act because they expect to have a big, crystal clear idea of what it is that they are wanting to become and clarity around how to get there. And those two, for me, are really critical in reinvention, in giving yourself the permission to start slowly to discover what's possible and what's
Mm. Mm.
desirable.
Mm. Wonderful. I love that. One of the things that when you were talking about forget about the future, does that mean that I often talk about vision, like you envision yourself or you
Mhm.
have a vision of, it doesn't have to be so crystal clear, but you do have a vision. Is that important? I mean, isn't it important for somebody to be able to, I don't know, meditate on it and then you see yourself in the future, like your future self. Now,
Mm.
is that how does that align with forgetting about your future?
Yeah, I sort of describe it as like front of mind and back of mind.
Okay.
So once you have that, which I agree with you, it's super helpful, but it doesn't need to be a preoccupation. So
Mm,
keep visioning it, keep it back there, let it animate what you want, let it sort of inform and shape your general direction.
mm-hmm,
But don't
mm-hmm,
get hung up on the fact that what you see right now has to be
mm-hmm.
what becomes. So
Right.
in the back of your mind is this big, what I call intention. So this is the thing that you want, that you're moving towards. And in the front of your mind is your small attention to what you're learning and what's happening as you go. I think a lot of times in my own experience, that was sort of flipped. So people had this big idea and then they just rushed to get to that thing. And
Yes.
they weren't always alive to the process of getting there
Mm,
and what they were learning. And they got fixed in a plan or fixed in a whatever. And they weren't kind of really mining the experience of getting there for all that it was teaching them and telling them. So it's really, again, a little play to say, absolutely have that big idea, that big whatever, but allow it to be an intention rather than an absolutely clear thing until you get close to it. Obviously, at
yes.
some point,
Yeah.
it'll come into clarity. I mean, my book went through 5 different iterations and 3 different titles, and it became something that when I sat down to write it in 2020, there is no way that I could have seen this.
Now in this 21st century, we're being asked to show up differently and
Mm,
maybe to just a little thought on why is this chaos that we're experiencing, I guess, today, why is that the perfect or how is this the perfect time or context for reinvention, in this world we're
mm.
living in that.
I think it's an interesting moment where the opportunity and the requirement for reinvention sort of are colliding, where there will be a lot of people who are going to have to look at what they know, what they're good at, what they like to do, and what they don't like to do, and figure out how to repurpose that for a very changing and workplace.
Yes.
And at the same time, for those who are driven more by a desire for reinvention rather than a requirement for it, we are living longer. We are continually seeing how, in the workplace and otherwise, people are repurposing their own capabilities for fractional roles, for entrepreneurship, for creating new things like podcasts. So I think there's never been a time where our social scripts are as in flex in the
Yes.
midst of changing, where it's kind of like what should be what's supposed to be for a 50-year-old woman or a 60-year-old woman or whatever. It's now, with those things kind of unraveling, there's more space than ever to say, I'm deciding what I want to do and who I
Yeah.
want to be. So that's how in the book now I talk about the unraveling, which is those social scripts that used to hold us very much in place and tell us you got a job and you held on to it and then you retired at 65 and that's what you do. And We all know that's gone. So
Yes.
the choice that we have is, what are we going to fill it with? What are we going to replace it with? Because it can
Mm.
be replaced with a sort of cobbled together version of that,
Mm-hmm.
where, okay, I'm going to retire a little bit earlier, a little bit later. Maybe I'll change jobs once. Maybe I'll try something. It can be sort of hesitant and half hearted, or it can be, okay,
Mm.
well, in a world that is rewarding and enabling creativity, entrepreneurship, digital kind of connection, what do I want my next contribution to be? What do I want my
Mm.
next sort of connection to be from a work
Mm-hmm.
perspective? So I
Mm-hmm.
think as much as it can feel very overwhelming, I think it's also ripe for opportunity for people to, yeah, design their own
Mm.
way forward.
I think just from my own example, like I had an idea of what I wanted to do. I didn't know exactly how I wanted to do it, but I didn't know
Mm.
anything about podcasting. I didn't understand. So it's a learning, it's pushing those boundaries and not being fearful and actually giving yourself permission to test those boundaries, I think. So that's
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and to realize that they've kept you safe for a while, but they also might have ceased to be useful for you. And I open the book saying, I'm going to give you one permission, because the rest of this book is about you giving it to yourself. But the permission I want to give you is to be optimistic,
Mm.
because I feel like pessimism has become our currency. You somehow sound naive if you put something out that suggests that maybe there are opportunities here, that we're not in the middle of a cataclysm. There is so much reason to feel that way, and I personally get it. But I also know that if that's my starting point, it limits my own sense of power and ability to move forward in my life. So in some ways, I really want to push back on fear,
Mm.
negativity, and
Mm-hmm.
pessimism, and cynicism, because I think as much as they make for great posts and maybe
News
satisfying
cycles.
conversation,
Yeah.
yeah, they're not fertile ground for us to invest in ourselves and figure out how we make the best contribution to the world, because we convince ourselves that we can't do anything and that nothing is
Mm-hmm.
possible. So
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
think it's really like important for us to give
Mm-hmm.
ourselves permission to be optimistic in whatever way doesn't feel Pollyanna and naive. And I'm going to treat this period of not knowing as a fertile ground for us to discover what's possible, rather than the end of human intelligence as we know it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. So if anybody's listening and realizes the intelligence that Jillian has, and you can probably really love to read her book. I know I'm
Yeah,
looking forward to reading it.
good. Please do. And pre-order it, because I need to,
Oh, okay.
feed the Amazon. Yeah, no,
Yes.
pre-orders are very important.
So tell us how to do that and
Yeah.
what's next.
Yeah, it's out in the States on the 16th of September.
Exciting.
Yeah, currently available on Amazon for pre-order. And it will also be in bookstores after the 16th, but currently it is available
Amazing.
on Amazon. Hmm.
Wow. Well, that's congratulations. I don't know if you want to end off with anything or just to.
No, I think I just appreciate the opportunity to share what I've learned and what I've experienced, and particularly with women who are in the process of reinvention. I think I recently shared something about my own mother, who never gave herself permission to reinvent herself. And her own story has been an inspiration and a source of continued sort of urgency for me on a
Mm-hmm.
personal level to
Mm-hmm.
continue growing and evolving and changing. And I think it's so important for women to give themselves that permission, and to know that it's going to feel strange and awkward and hard and crazy and fun and all those things, but you just keep going one step at a time and
Mm-hmm.
trust that regardless of the outcome, there is value in expanding your life into new spaces.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Love it.
Mm.
Thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate
Thank you.
it.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
What an inspiring conversation with Jillian Reilly. A reminder to us that reinvention isn't a privilege for a lucky few, but a necessity and a skill that we can all learn. Here are a few key takeaways I hope you can carry with you. Give yourself permission. No one else can do it for you, not your family, your boss, or society. Take small, deliberate steps instead of waiting for the perfect plan. Clarity often comes through action. And see fear not as a stop sign, but as a sign you're crossing into new, growth-filled territory. If this episode has sparked something in you, a curiosity, an idea, or even a little restlessness, let's explore it together. You have everything you need to create the life you've been imagining. You just have to give yourself permission. I invite you to book a complimentary breakthrough call with me, where we'll uncover your strengths, your passions, your values, and the possibilities for your own reinvention. You'll find the link in the show notes. Remember, my friend, your next chapter is waiting. Let's make it extraordinary.